Hi folks, so I'm going to be walking you through some of the models today for your lab exam. The first thing I wanted to bring up though was for chapter 20 in blood, we do have models that we usually put out and slides to identify the white blood cells over here. The thing is, we didn't take any pictures of those, so I also thought it would be kind of helpful for you guys to just identify the white blood cells from this slide here. So here are the white blood cells, the leukocytes, and you have granular and agranular leukocytes. So our neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, they're all granular. They're called granular because they look like they have little grains inside of them. And then you have the agranular lymphocytes and monocytes. Now, one of the things that I know that gets confusing is all white blood cells are leukocytes. Only some of them are lymphocytes, okay? And sometimes we call all white blood cells lymphocytes. No, there's one group of agranular white blood cells, the lymphocytes, that are in high concentration, 20 to 30%. Only neutrophils exist in a higher concentration in your blood. But having said that, they're all leukocytes. Only lymphocytes are lymphocytes. For the lab exam, what I'm going to want you to identify are whether or not they're granular or agranular. You should be able to identify which is which, what a neutrophil is versus a lymphocyte versus a monocyte. These guys are like giant blobs, right? In the lecture exam, you guys are going to be identifying their function, okay? Which ones are phagocytes? Which ones are elevated in, let's say, a parasitic infection? And then, of course, we have our erythrocytes, which are the red blood cells. Those are always, erythrocytes. So this slide's going to be important for both the lecture and lab exam. All right. So now let's move on, if I can. Is this going to let me move on? To models. I do not want to keep my annotations. All right. So I'm going to move back over here to our models since we're still recording. Great. Let's go on to the heart. All right. So using your lab study guide, the lecture components are in here. What's the cardiac cycle? What is the conduction system of the heart? You guys can study that for the lecture exam. For the lab exam, these are the photographs I'm going to be using. And so what you need to do is be able to go to your study guide and identify, let's say, the apex. So on the heart here, the apex is the tip. I lost my pointer because I'm not in PowerPoint anymore here. The base is the top part of the heart. You have the right auricle. Remember, the right for the heart is right and left is designated by the patient. So the right is over here, the right auricle. This is the left auricle. The auricle is the same thing as the atrium. It's just we tend to refer to the atrium as the inside chamber. The auricle, you're always referring to the outside of the heart. So it's called an auricle because it looks kind of like little ears. Well, they actually look really big when they're inflated. We have the superior and inferior vena cava. This is the superior vena cava coming into the right auricle. The inferior is on the back side, on the posterior side of the heart. This is the anterior side of the heart. So the inferior is going to be coming in down below. You can't see that until we flip the heart over. The coronary sinus and the intraatrial septum, you can't really see here until we open up the heart. So right auricle, left auricle. This is going to be the right ventricle, left ventricle. These are going to be some of the coronary vasculature. We'll get to that in a little bit. Right up here, this green dot is the sinoatrial node, the external view of it. Remember, the sinoatrial node is where where the contraction begins in the heart, okay? In terms of the yellow stuff, this is fat that would be on the outside of the heart. Up here, this big red curve, this is the aorta, and the aorta has three branches, 1, 2, 3. The first one is going to be the brachiocephalic trunk, all right? The second one is the left common carotid artery, and this is the left subclavian artery. As the aorta goes down, that's going to be the descending aorta, going down to circulation in the body. Right here, we have all ascending circulation. This little component right here is a ligament. You don't need to worry about the name of that ligament right now, but just be aware that that's a ligament that holds the aorta in place, associated with the left pulmonary artery coming or leaving the right ventricle here. Here's the right ventricle. Remember, an artery is always identified as blood leaving the heart. A vein is always blood coming into the heart. Let's see, what else have we got here? On the left, here's our left atrium. We have left and right pulmonary veins, which you can't really see very well here. And then the intraatrial septum, which we'll look at in a minute. So here's the posterior view of the heart. On the posterior view of the heart, you're going to see more vasculature. Here is a piece of trachea. Okay, here's some of part of the aorta. On the posterior view of the heart, what you want to pay attention to, this is the right atrium, so this is going to be the inferior vena cava coming in. This was the part that we couldn't see before. Over here are the pulmonary, well, here's some of the pulmonary circulation coming back into the heart. So these are going to be pulmonary veins bringing oxygenated blood into the left atrium. Okay, down here's the left ventricle, real big meaty left ventricle. Here's the right ventricle. Right here, this big blood vessel here is the coronary sinus. And the coronary sinus is going to be a very large part of the vasculature supplying or removing deoxygenated blood from the heart muscle itself. So remember, these blood vessels are supplying the heart, the myocardium, with oxygen and removing CO2. The heart does not get nourished by the blood that's inside of it. The heart is nourished by the blood vessels on the exterior of the heart, not inside the heart. So that's something to be aware of. You'll talk about that more in physiology. All right. Let's see. What else have we got for you guys to look at? We in this view, we've removed the fat, so you don't have to worry about that. Let's come down to the interior view of the heart. Okay, so this is what a lot of us are very familiar with, looking at the individual chambers of the heart, okay? Inside of the heart, we have, here's the right atrium, the left atrium. In between is the intraatrial septum. It may look a little confusing here because we have the aorta right here leaving, but between the two chambers is the intraatrial septum. That is the division between the right and left septa. And do you remember the name of the little hole that connects the two during fetal development? Yes, just think about that for a few minutes. I'll leave that for you guys to try to remember. Here are the chordae tendineae holding the valve in place, the atrioventricular valve. Okay, so this is the right atrioventricular valve that's going to be separating and keeping blood in place between the two chambers. What's happening here is we want to prevent backflow. You want blood to be going in a single direction from the atrium down to the ventricle, and then you can't see the vasculature going out to pulmonary circulation here, but you want to keep blood going from top to bottom and then bottom out. You don't want the blood going from ventricle to atrium. That's a problem. That's called prolapse. And so these valves keep blood moving in one direction so that you never have a mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. All right. So over here, these are called the chordae tendineae, holding the atrioventricular valve in place. All right. And these are the papillary muscles associated with the chordae tendineae. You have that both on the right and the left atrioventricular separations. All right. Let's see. What else have we got here? Here is a circulation going up to the aorta. This is a semilunar valve going out from the ventricle. And like I said, we're missing the right ventricle out to the pulmonary circulation, so you can't see that particular semilunar valve. So these are tricuspid valves. The semilunar valves leave the ventricles. All right, so now let's look at circulation to the lungs. So right here on the outside, you have an anterior view of the heart associated with our respiratory model. So what we have, here's the superior vena cava. Right here is superior circulation. You can't see the branch to the descending aorta right now. Right here is the branch going out to pulmonary circulation from the right ventricle. That pulmonary branch splits to the right, and that's the left lung, and to the right lung. Now on these two separate sides of the model, on the left lung you see two lobes, the superior and inferior. Over here on the right lung you have superior, middle, and inferior. We'll get to that when we talk about respiratory. But the branches branch out into smaller vasculature, where the vasculature will be surrounding individual alveoli, which we'll see in a little bit in the respiratory model. And then that's where CO2 is dropped off. We breathe it out through our trachea, goes out through our larynx, out through our mouth and our nasal cavity, and oxygen can hop on, and this is the vasculature coming back in. So remember, the vasculature coming back in to the right ventricle, right atrium, left atrium. It's early this morning that I'm doing this. On the left atrium is going to be bringing oxygenated blood through a vein. So that's going to be the pulmonary vein draining into the left atrium. The blood goes down to the left ventricle and then is pumped out through the aorta. And so if we look at the vasculature again here, we can finally see the right ventricle pumping blood out through the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary artery is carrying deoxygenated blood out to the lungs. And then here is the pulmonary vein draining back into the left atrium, down to the left ventricle, and out the aorta. We will do vasculature in another video.